Have you achieved success and a high income, but still lack personal fulfillment and work-life balance? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful But Struggling podcast. Join us as Erin, Eunicia, Joanne, and Mim share transformative insights and practical strategies just for you. Discover real stories and lessons that will elevate your personal satisfaction, professional accomplishment, and financial empowerment.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about the 4 main reasons why people don't feel successful. And why is this important to you? If you don't feel successful, you might be doing everything right, checking off all the boxes, and yet you will end up sabotaging yourself. So we're going to be talking about 4 different lenses to think through this. So we're going to do the money mindset myths. We're going to talk about the neuroscience behind it. We're going to talk about personal development and presence. So hold tight because we have a lot of good information for you. You really do want to be paying attention to this. So I would love to start with our wealth strategist here, Eunicia, talking about the money mindset things. We were all together in a professional conference. So this is a treat that we're all here together and our good energy. So I'm going to hand the microphone to Eunicia. Please tell us about that.
Joanne, thank you. So first and foremost, you probably are noticing that we are making it up on the fly. Bear with us. We're having fun. Let me ask you the question, a very important question. When is the last time you thought about money and you just felt really good about it? Really good. You just knew that everything's just perfect. Has that happened to you guys? I have not come across one person, and if you're listening, I know you're probably thinking about all sorts of different things that you could be doing better with money. So this conference that we just attended that Joanne just mentioned, one of the presenters, Mel Abraham, he talked about a lot of different things, but the 3 things that I wanted to share with you right now are focused on the 3 top myths that a lot of individuals have. And frankly, we see those when clients come to us wanting to work with us, and they'll ask us things such as, just tell me where to invest my money, Eunicia. That's, by the way, one of the myths. The other myth is, but I have plenty of time. And the other one is, but money is complicated. And I know that Erin here, when we first started working together, she said, I just don't even want to think about it. I don't want to see it. Kind of going back to the third, just tell me what to do. So let's decipher the first myth. Money is complicated. The reality is that yes, it is. And the reality is that as you're listening to this, you probably have 1,001 things to do. But I'm here to tell you that money is only as complicated as we make it to be, as uncomfortable as we are with it. So a beautiful thing that happens when you start focusing on your money story and your money journey is that you start becoming a lot more comfortable with money. And what you identify is that money really isn't that complicated. When you have a framework to think about the money, lenses to think about the money through, right? In terms of how do you invest it? What happens with it? How does it resonate with you, with your family legacy, with your business, with your income, with your taxes? It is complicated, but we need to look at it through lenses that make it not just less complicated, but more in alignment to how you see it in your everyday life. So as you're thinking that money is complicated, just think about whatever it is that you do in your personal life. How easy is it for you to do what you're doing every single day? Because you know how to do it. Well, guess what? When you learn how to work with your own money and how to understand it, it becomes a whole lot less complicated, right? Myth number 2, I have plenty of time. Let me tell you this, that I am a person, I'm not going to talk about you, I'm just going to share my story. We thought, my husband and I thought that we had the teams on our side. And we thought that we had time. I thought that we had time. Until I took a pause years ago and I looked at where are we? Where are we truly? And what I realized was that if we had taken matters in some cases into our own hands by hiring the proper support, we would have been in a lot different of a place. And consequently, when I left corporate America, it would have been so much easier of a journey if we had done things correctly earlier on. So when you're thinking about the idea of you have time, yes, you do. And if you're asking yourself, well, if I've lost all this time, when is the next best time? The next best time is right now for you to do something about your overall wealth empowerment, about your financial journey, about your money journey, whether it be personal or business. Because the more you wait, you might already be in the catch-up, what I call the catch-up phase. And that's okay. There's still light at the end of the tunnel. But that light at the end of the tunnel does not come closer unless we actually walk towards it. So just remember that when you're thinking that maybe we have time, let's not procrastinate and push the buck or kick the can down the road to next year and then the next year, because a month becomes 2 months becomes a year becomes 5, and we end up thinking about retirement or about possibly selling our business, and it's already too late to do a lot of different things to optimize. So myth number 3, this is one of my all-time favorites because oftentimes individuals come to us and they say, but Eunice, I just want to know, what do you like to invest in? Just do it for us. Can your team just do it for us? And the clear answer could be very easily, absolutely we can. But if we did that, we would be doing a huge disservice to you. So if you're finding yourself in this situation where you're thinking money is too hard, I have time, I have him or her that's investing my money for me, or I just want that him or her to invest the money for you, ask yourself the question. If you had tickets to pick your favorite sports, if you had tickets to the playoffs, to the end of the season games, right? And you really wanted to attend, but maybe you said, I just don't feel like it today, but I want the experience. I want to know that I'm feeling that experience. Would you ever give those tickets to your best friend and say, can you please just make sure that you attend this game on my behalf? These are my tickets, and that I have the same feeling. Like, I want you to somehow transfer that feeling vicariously to me, but I don't want to go. I just want you to do it. Would you ever do that to yourself? Would you ever do that to those tickets you probably spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on? It's the same thing when people say, I just want somebody else to do it for me. You becoming empowered, you becoming knowledgeable, you becoming educated, you being able to resonate with where your money's at does not mean you have to do it. Notice I didn't say you have got to figure out how to do it on your own, but you need to understand what's happening. And when you understand what's happening, guess what? All of those 3 myths, they just poof, they go away, they will disappear. And instead of the myths and instead of the pain and instead of the frustration, what we're doing is, guess what? We're elevating our game to the next level. So I'm going to pass it on to Joanne, who's going to talk about the neuroscience behind how we think about changes and about the things that are hurting us. And as you're thinking about maybe money being one of those contention points for you, just know that it's all within reach. It's all about you asking the right question. But more importantly, it's just you being okay with being vulnerable, just a little vulnerable, to first ask the question.
Onicia, dropping some magic there. I love it. Thank you. I'm always so intently paying attention to you and all that you have to share. And I'm going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about more science and neuroscience behind this. So I'm going to tell you 3 things. Why is it that you're getting stuck in this cycle of stress overwhelm that's putting you at risk for burnout? What are the main contributors to what's really going on in your brain and in your central nervous system? And then, of course, what to do. So, and we were in this conference and one of the speakers was Natalie Ellis. And it grabbed my attention because she said, I'm going to talk about the science behind this. And then she's like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm like, I am. I can, as a psychiatrist and as a coach, these are topics that really resonate because sometimes we feel guilty. We feel like we're doing something wrong. We're checking off the boxes and yet we're not feeling well. And we have to step back and think of what's really going on in my system, literally. And it grabbed my mind also. And I was thinking of a woman physician, very successful, that I've been coaching. And at the beginning, I was talking to her about burnout and overwhelm. And there was a little bit of a resistance, right? And sometimes you might think about how this applies to you, that we hear these topics and it grabs our attention, but then we're like, oh, no, that's not me. And then we have to think, and she would say things, no, I'm not burned out. I really don't need help. I'm not burned out, and, stress and overwhelmed, that's just the way we are all the time. But ask the question, is that true? Do you really need to stay in that stress and overwhelm? Is there a better way? And then these were some of the subtle things that I heard from her. So see which ones sound familiar to you. And these were some of the things that we heard in the conference too. And we guys can resonate here too, saying, I'm a people pleaser, or I like to please people, because it sometimes has a negative connotation. I can't say no. Oh my goodness, how often I fall there. Or it has to be perfect. Yeah, never been there myself, right? And then it's, okay, what can you take off of your plate? And then that feeling of, no, everything is on my plate. I can't take anything off your plate. And that are just some of the reasons why, from our heart, with very good intentions, and it keeps us in that cycle of stress and overwhelm, right? And I like to mention that also, to have compassion with ourselves, because it's not necessarily something that we're doing wrong. It comes from a good place, but that puts us at risk, right? So it's not always the typical things that we think of. Of course, we have to think of, are you physically exhausted? Do you feel mentally tired? Are you cranky when you come home? All of those other things matter too, but sometimes it comes from a good place. And then if we step back and we think about it from a different lens of what's going on in your brain and in your body from that central nervous system perspective, right? Like, what are the main contributors? And then she talked, which I thought was so on point, about the biological influences, right? Like just your genetics of, or if you've had experiences throughout your life that were somewhat traumatic, or generational trauma that we're talking so much about, right? That's not your fault. What are some of the psychological influences, which is something that we talk a lot in my office as a psychiatrist, but then also as a coach and in personal development, of childhood trauma? Or what was the energy that your caregivers were bringing? Is that what you learned as well? So your nervous system was trained to be in this hyper alert state. So it's like a fire alarm that's very sensitive. So it goes off very quickly. And then, of course, our environmental circumstances. So not just where you live, who's around you, socioeconomic status, but even things like toxins, or other things that are going on around you. And this, I bring it up also because these are things that are not your fault. So often we fall into this place of shame and guilt. We beat ourselves up. And that also keeps us in that cycle of stress and overwhelm, because then we make it mean that there's something wrong with us. And that keeps that story going. So it's a good place to stop and have that compassion with ourselves. And it's not like there's not something that we can do about it. So we have to pause and focus on what's really important. A lot of the work is always about that, finding that pause and that emotion within you. And then, like, okay, Joanne, you're saying all these things, right? Like, it's not our fault. What can we do? So, and this is such a big topic, but think about it. What is that one thing that you can do to improve your wellness? Can you go to sleep a little bit earlier? Can you drink a little bit more water, right? That overall kind of well-being. Do you need something a little bit more therapeutic? Do you need to be talking to a mentor, or something like a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist or a coach? And if those are not available to you right away, even a friend, sometimes having the awareness to say it out loud can be very therapeutic. Third, lifestyle changes, right? Like, can you lower your pace a little bit? We talk a lot about that. You should have seen us this morning, right? It's like, okay, let's slow down. Erin talks a lot about like the slow down to go faster. So that's important. And then, or even just going outside in nature. And then, of course, what we're here to share with you as well, personal growth and personal development. So that's a lot, I know, but think of one thing that you can do to regulate your central nervous system. Sometimes it helps me to think about it from that kind of brain standpoint. So it's not just all, fluffy things. And sometimes just knowing, oh, if I look outside into the sun for a couple of minutes, that helps my brain be more alert. So it's sometimes little tricks like that. And one beautiful message that she said, this is a little bit of a tangent, but this is what I want to say here. It's in my heart, is one of the things that we have to define, it's what's enough. That's also a big reason why we get stuck in this. We're successful, but we're struggling. And it's knowing you are enough already. Everything else is a bonus. She said that and it touched my heart, and I sit with that thought. So, and this is a beautiful switch and pivot to what Mim is going to share. It's one of my favorite words about presence, and it's just perfect segue. So I'm going to move the microphone to Mim so that she can tell us all about presence. Thank you, Mim.
Thank you, Joanne. And what a wonderful episode so far. Eunicia talking about that structure around your finances. And Joanne, that charge just gave us choose one thing to regulate your nervous system or re-regulate your nervous system. So good. And it all really goes together as we think about presence. People ask me, what even is presence? People come to me, I lead a presence workshop and a series of workshops at big companies like Yahoo and Estee Lauder and NBC Universal. And it's so interesting because when I'm talking with people about presence, most people say, oh, presence is so important. That's such a big topic. And some of the people come to me, yes, presence, that inner being, that inner knowing. And other people will come to me and say, oh, presence, that executive presence, and demonstrating that executive presence. So then the question is, what is it? What is presence? And really it's both. As we think about presence is on the inside and presence is on the outside. And you can't just have one or the other. And you've got all that wonderful inner presence, but if you're not projecting that, then it's not going to translate into you looking to have impact, into your relationships, into growing whatever you're doing professionally. And then if you've got the outer presence, but it's not backed up with that inner presence, then something's going to crack. Something's going to kind of come out at the seams, or you're going to crack. And you certainly don't want that, which is why it's true that these two topics, the neuroscience behind it. So the things I'm going to talk about certainly stand on the shoulders of what Joanne talked about because it all ties in. So Brendan Burchard was the sponsor of the conference and one of the speakers, and he talked about that presence, that inner presence of you in the moment. What does you in the moment? How do you be that you in the moment? Because if you're not, then people are ultimately it's going to read. People are ultimately at some point going to get that, and you're not going to be as happy. So being in the moment, what does it take for you to get into the moment? And what we tend to do, and this does tie into what Joanne was talking about, is we get into this set point. I mean, you can trace this way back to your childhood, to your experiences, and we get into these set points, and they affect our presence from today. So if you haven't done that work, whether it's with coaching, whether it's with therapeutic approaches, if you haven't done that work, then it's time to take a good look at that, because how much are you allowing yourself to be in the moment and truly inhabiting the present and authentic with yourself and authentic with other people, whether you're talking to a colleague, to a client, to a direct report, to thousands of people. If you're a speaker, if you're not present in the moment, it could be that it is coming from one of those things from way long ago that you only allowed yourself to get to a certain point. And so what takes people out of inner presence most often is getting hooked in the past or getting hooked into the future. And when I say past and future, most often it's past regret, past limits, past fears, and I just take them into the current moment. Or it's future fears and future what ifs and all those things that can cloud you really being present. Now, here's the other thing. Some people will say, you're saying you want me to be present, but my present is not so good. Yes, I'm successful in my career, but we've got a serious illness in the family. Like there's something that's really difficult in the present. And so this is a distinction I want to make. And that is the difference between what I call the circumstantial present. It's your circumstances, which is separate from your true presence, which is separate from a sense of openness of finding a little inner spaciousness in the present. It has nothing to do with your circumstances. And this is the stuff of Olympic athletes who cannot afford to be thinking about, yeah, I just had that injury and I'm afraid right now that I'm going to re-injure it with this next game or this next race. They can't afford to be thinking about that. So they do the mental conditioning. So the question for you is, how do you do the mental conditioning? And different people have different ways of doing this. So Joanne talked about take a walk in nature. It's a great, great healer. One of the tips we got from Brendan just was a great, very quick. He said, do this. He said, close your eyes and you're going to take 3 breaths. And your breaths are going to be like this. You're going to picture the breath and you're going to picture it this way. You're going to breathe in from your belly up through the top of your head, and that's your in breath. And then you're going to breathe out from the top of your head. You're going to picture from the top of your head and breathe out of your feet. And once you do that 3 times, and we could have a fun conversation on this, you're going to start activating your parasympathetic nervous system. So all those fight or flight and those anxious thoughts of past, future, anything are going to start to subside because you're doing the conditioning. So presence is the inner presence part is something that needs to be conditioned and it needs to be done regularly. Many ways to do it, whether it's prayer, whether it's meditation, it's these physical things that you can do to help you get there. So that's one huge thing, that inner presence. And then the outer presence piece, well, so much about that. It's that physicality. It's great that I'm now chill because I've done my breathing and I'm feeling like I am really here and I have allowed myself to just let the past be the past. It's not present. It's not real. It was real, but it's not now. And now is all we have. So you've done that good work. And now you want to invite other people into that. They need to know that you are fully here. So you're going to give it to them in your eye contact. You're going to give it to them in your posture. The sound of your voice, you're going to speak up and you're going to pause and you're going to listen to people. You don't have the need to take up all the airspace, but you're also not afraid to speak up. You got that from your inner presence. And that impactful physicality all starts with your posture. So let people see this and let people see that. And then the last thing that and this is Anthony Trucks. He was one of the speakers and he shared that I love, and this is near and dear to my heart. And so before I pass it on to Aaron, I'll say, once you have your inner and once you have the outer in terms of the physicality, the other part of the outer is literally what you're saying. People say, "Oh, that's great. I'm feeling good in here, and I know what to do with my arms or my hands or my eye contact and some facial expression. But what about what I'm going to say?" And I cannot stress enough process and structure. And he talked about process and structure. And you have to have a process. You have to have structure for if you want to show up with full presence and be impactful with people. You don't just, now Eunicia made a joke at the start and said, "We're doing this on the fly." Well, yes and no, because we all made a plan ahead of time. Okay, here's what we're going to be talking about. And we all came up with we're very excited because we just came off this business conference. So it's fresh. This is fresh. But we put our plan together. You're always going to put your plan together if you want to be impactful. And then people will say to me, final piece, "But sometimes I have to be extemporaneous." Yes, sometimes you do have to be extemporaneous. But when you have now conditioned yourself to be doing all of this on a regular basis, you've disciplined. It's a discipline. Again, if you're not treating yourself like an Olympic athlete, you're doing yourself a disservice. So when you're doing all of this on a regular basis, then when you need to show up in the moment, there's no big drama of, "Oh, I got to show up in the moment," because you know what? That's who you are. That's who you are. So that brings us back to the inner part. What you're doing all along the way, you don't even know it, is you are updating your identity. You're updating yourself as a person who is here authentically, impactfully, inner, outer, in every way. Thank you. And this goes right on to Aaron. We've just been talking about personal presence. And when you have this personal presence, this inner, outer, one of the big things that ties into it is personal development. And as you are wanting to grow your finances, as you're wanting to re-regulate yourself with your neurology, you are thinking about, okay, how do I just keep going along that path? How do I keep growing? So there's so much about personal development. Erin, tell us your takeaways from yesterday about that.
There are so many. The one resonating factor that I found is that, well, let's start here. So one of the questions is, do you ever ask yourself, how did I get here? I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed. I'm doing these things at work that I didn't want to. My family's not where I want it to be. How did I get there? How did I end up right here? And when you don't have the end in mind, when you don't have a clear map of where you want to go, randomness isn't going to get you there. I know for myself, as a physician, I often found myself in positions that I was like, I didn't ask for this. And yet I didn't create a clear path for myself. So of course I ended up, other people were making that decision for me. I didn't create that clarity first. One of the speakers that spoke, his name is Ed Milet, somebody that I've only been following a short time, and he's been so impactful. He had the end in mind, and he shared this story about the moment his first child was born. You know what he did? He gave his son a pep talk. You are a gladiator. You are smart. You are worthy. This newborn perfect baby was just born, and he had the insight to know, what does he want for his son? And he started at that very moment. So now that this son is a young adult, he has that as part of his cellular being. Every day, his dad feeding into that, you are worthy. You are a gladiator. He did the same thing with his daughter. So the cellular being of these kids, he had the end in mind. How do I want my kids to feel? How do they want to think of me as their parent? And I think of my own self. I'm a pediatrician. I had 3 children, and I didn't figure out that clarity until I was 50 years old and my kids were preteens and teens. And so to get to Eunicia's point, and I think each of you have made the point, is it too late for me to start? It is never too late to start. The best time for me to have started being the best parent I could have been was that very moment my children were born. But when I really leveled up, I was 50 years old. And my kids were well into growing up, but I realized it's not too late. And now I'm going to get clear. And for me, it also goes to the theme of getting support. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have a mentor. I saw all these people role modeling busyness. Overwhelm was the norm in medicine. And I didn't have role models. For me, the person who had to shake it up was I decided to invest in myself, and I got a coach. No one else in my community, no other physicians, no other medical providers, even the leaders, none of them had a coach. And I just felt like I've been trying to do it my own way, on my own. Can you relate? Maybe I'm smart. I'm a professional. I'm solving people's problems all the time. For 20 years into my career, I was solving it my way, and it took getting that outside perspective from a coach. And maybe for you, it's a mentor. Maybe it's a therapist. There's not one way to get to a different place. But for me, the reason why I'm the parent that I'm so proud of now is not because I started from the beginning, but when I got that outside perspective, I realized today, right now, I can start. And now I am so much more where I want to be, not only in my parenting, but as a spouse, as a business owner, as a leader. I needed to figure out where's the end. What end have that in mind now? Where do I want to be, not tomorrow, but also in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, and in the different aspects, not just where do I want to be in my career, but as a parent, as a leader of my family, as an individual, as a friend, as an influential person, how do I want to role model that? And if I'm not crystal clear, then I am not going to be where I want to be, or even close to that, because I don't have the end in mind. So I want to ask you if you can relate to, how did I get here? Where do I want to level up? What do I want to change in my life? And if the way you've been doing it so far is not getting you there, then I'm going to ask you, what one thing can you commit to have a different outcome? Do you need to connect with someone? Do you need to find a mentor? Do you need to hire a coach? Do you need to see a therapist? Do you need to connect with some friends to get something to shake you out of where you're at right now and really shift? And I talk about math. And if you're the math of one person, there's not much math you can do with one. But when you add that one other individual, now you can add, you can multiply, you can grow exponentially. And I would encourage you to consider, what other support do I need to bring in so I can do math differently than one? If you've been used to solving all the things on your own, trying to be independent, let's start getting used to asking for help sooner and more often, and realizing that asking for help can be a strength, not a weakness.
We're going to go ahead and close, but I took notes. I know we all took notes from today. And again, this was a recap of what we've heard this past weekend. And frankly, you didn't have to spend a whole 2 full days to get the absolute gist of the best takeaways that we took. So as we recap, the main reasons why people don't feel successful. What are the main reasons you don't feel successful? Is it because you might have a limiting mindset when it comes to money? Is it because maybe you're afraid of what happens with money? Is it because maybe you don't use some of the proven neuroscience strategies that you could be leveraging to better your own personal development, to better your own life? Is it because maybe when it comes to personal presence, everybody else sees you as you got it, but you don't feel it? And is it because maybe when it comes to you developing yourself, it could be that somebody else is more important, the kids are more important, your patients, your clients are more important? Or is it because we need to start diving in and leaning in? So without further ado, listen to the next episode and give us your feedback. We're here to listen. We're here to help. Looking forward to next time.
Don't miss out on more strategies that will elevate you to new heights. Visit successfulbutstruggling.com now, where you'll discover exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with each of us individually. There you can dive deeper into how you, too, can take your personal and professional game to the next level. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Number 1, connect with us on the website. And number 2, tune in to the next episode.